Hello, everyone. All right. Hi, this is Karen Philo House, and I am the Washington State Association of the Deaf representative. We have monthly Zoom meetings, Zoom ASL chats, and you see three people currently on the screen. Um, I'm one of the I'm the presenter basically. You see our hearing interpreter who's voicing, and then you see our deaf interpreter who's signing. For anyone who is low vision or who prefers to watch a deaf interpreter because of the background being a little bit darker and the dress being black, which is visually accessible. We're going to ask that we hold all questions until the end of the presentation. And if you are not wanting to comment, we can also accept questions in the chat and read those out for you. And I can't think of what else. Oh, and thank you so much to the Office of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing for providing our interpreters this evening, our two hearing interpreters and our two deaf interpreters, as well as our CART provider. So thank you so much. And I think that is it. And you can also watch the captions if that is your preference. You can click on closed captions at the bottom of your screen as well. I can't think of what else I need to say. All right, anyway, this evening, our presentation is by a CODA, which stands for Child of Deaf Adults. And she is also a scientist. And she will be talking about three different things this evening. She'll be covering the flu, COVID, and RSV. And she'll be talking about the difference between those and why it's important to get vaccines for them, for each of those. And any other new information that we might not know about those, she'll be sharing that with us. And she's in Tennessee, right? Athena, you're in Tennessee? Athena's saying yes, that's correct. And this is her name sign, Athena. So welcome to the stage, Athena.
Thank you guys so much. I am going to share my screen. I did bring a presentation today, and I've been told that when I share my screen, the spotlighting might mess up a little bit. So just go ahead and click gallery view. And we are going to try that if my Zoom just froze. Good. Okay, hold on. Please hold. Share, share. Are we good? Can we see? Oh, okay, good. Yes. Yes. So today I'm going to talk about COVID-19, RSV, and influenza. And I wanted to start this slide off with the CDC's this year's advertising campaign to get your flu shot, which is wild to mild. And I thought it was really cute. The pufferfish to the goldfish for if you get your flu vaccine. So you can take it from a wild disease to just a mild disease. And we can talk about that a little bit more. So I'm going to start with takeaways. So if your internet connection cuts out or you leave, this is the slide I hope everyone takes things away from. The first is to get your COVID-19 or flu vaccine before Halloween, because we want to say boo to the flu and COVID too. And we'll talk about why that timing is and why Halloween's a good indicator. The second takeaway I want to share is that you can get 4 free COVID tests delivered to your house. The government has started this program again, so you can just go to covidtests.gov, put in your information, and you'll get 4 free COVID tests show up in the mail in a couple weeks. We just got ours. Third takeaway, we just went through a global pandemic, and when you're sick, stay home. And if you need to go out, use what you learned during the pandemic to wear a mask, reduce contact with people, and social distance. I know we've made it through, but there were a lot of really important lessons that we learned from the pandemic that we can still apply to annual flu seasons. And finally, wash your hands. And I have a fun little thing at the very end of the presentation about bubbles and why washing your hands works. Okay, so let's start with some general definitions and things that are applicable to all three viruses. The first of which is higher risk populations. And when we say higher risk populations, we're not necessarily talking about if these people may get sick, but more if these people do get sick, they are more likely to get very sick. So people who are older than 60 years old, infants and young children, people with weakened immune systems, and pregnant and recently pregnant people. I'm going to throw my mom under the bus here, and I texted her earlier and asked her if I could put a picture of her holding my new niece on this slide, and she didn't get back to me in time. So still throwing her over. My mom fits in the older adults category. So Christine, get your vaccine, and I know she has. Okay. So let's talk about just respiratory virus symptoms. I love this slide. And we're going to be talking a lot about, I'm going to use a little bit of jargon here that I want to share with everyone. All of these things basically have the same presentation, the same symptoms. And so we call them influenza-like illnesses. If you show up, or ILIs, if you show up to the doctor's office and you have a fever and a sore throat or a cold, they're just going to say, hey, you have an ILI, an influenza-like illness. It could be a cold. It could be COVID. It could be RSV, influenza, other coronaviruses. There's a whole host of things. There are literally hundreds of different viruses. And we have some quick tests for some of them, but we might not know what you have. So we just generally call it an influenza-like illness. And I'm sure that we are all very familiar with these symptoms. So I want to talk about the timeline. And this is last year's flu season, last year's ILI season, influenza-like illnesses. So this is a animation of CDC's flu view. And this shows across the US, across the season, where or when and where people were reporting influenza-like illnesses. So you can see, we're starting in late October. And the worst gets to right about the end of the year. And then you can see everything turns green again in about April. So here's a screenshot of the worst week of last year, which was ending in December 30th, 2023. So right at the end of the year, that was the height of the season. Cold season, flu season, whatever you want to call it, people were feeling gross. And in Tennessee, it's much worse than it is in Washington. So it's good to be where you are. And I really just want to reiterate that right now is the beginning of the respiratory disease season. That picture, that video starts at last week for this year. So you can see in this screen grab from this year, it starts at 40 weeks, which was last week, and it goes to 41 weeks, which was this week or this past week because of reporting. And I pulled up the most recent Washington State influenza update, which ended October 12th, so last week. And influenza-like illness activity, these are reports that are available on the Washington State Department of Health website, flu website, and they'll release a report every single week if you're interested. So minimal activity, 0 deaths, and most common flu this week is A. That's very, there are 2 types of the flu. There's A and B. They're just different kind of flavors of the flu, and A is generally more common. So that doesn't surprise me at all. And like we mentioned at the very beginning, how do you stop the flu? Get vaccinated, wash your hands often, cover your cough, and stay home while you're sick. Again, this could be found on Washington State Department of Health's influenza website, but it does cover all influenza-like illnesses. That's where the data is from. So let's talk about vaccines and why you should get vaccinated before Halloween. There are 2 weeks between vaccination and protection. This is across all types of vaccines that you'll get. There are 2 weeks between vaccinations and protections. This is a graph that I took that's a standard kind of immunology graph. And you can see at the very beginning of the graph, there's when you are first vaccinated and you have the primary immune response. And then about 2 weeks go by. I know that time isn't shown in that axis, but in most vaccinations, it's about 2 weeks. And then when you're exposed to the pathogen, again, when you're exposed to the virus, you get a higher response the second time. And that's because of a secondary immune response. And you can see that blue dotted line across is the antibody level. So now you have antibodies that are working for you. So you feel less gross when you're exposed the second time. People who are up to date on their vaccines have a lower chance of serious illness, so it will keep you out of the hospital. There is a higher likelihood that you're going to be kept out of the hospital. If anyone has questions about immunology, we can talk about that at the end of the presentation, about what the difference between a primary immune response is and a secondary immune response. But just generally, your secondary immune response with memory cells and antibodies is much more efficient and much better response, and it's a faster and stronger response, which is why we get vaccinated. Again, the height of flu season, like we saw in the earlier graphs, is around the end of the year, end of December, beginning of January. And flu ILI season, influenza-like illness season, has not really taken off yet. So right now is really the optimal time for vaccination. And you can see right in the middle of that green spot is Halloween. So say boo to the flu is a cute way to remember when to get vaccinated. So what are vaccines and why do we get them? I know I've talked about this before, but I just want to reiterate, it's training our bodies to recognize viruses or things that make us sick. And it is normal that your body will respond to the vaccine with side effects like a fever, headache, chills, and this is normal and a sign that not only the vaccine is working, but your immune system is working. I know sometimes there's a tendency to brush it off, and I do this too, where I'm like, oh, get vaccinated. It's not that bad. And then you feel really sick and you're like, damn it, Athena, why do I feel so gross? And it's because your immune system is working really well. And so when I feel gross after I get vaccinated, it's a nice reminder that my immune system is working really hard for me and to sit on the couch for a little bit. And I just want to reiterate that for these vaccines that we're going to be talking about, they do not contain live virus. It's very rare. It's not common for vaccines to contain live virus. And none of the vaccines that we're talking about today contain live virus, so you cannot get sick from it. One thing I hear a lot is, I got the vaccine and then I got sick and I got it from the vaccine. And I just want to say that now that we know it takes about 2 weeks for protection, if someone infects you in the waiting room waiting to get vaccinated, the vaccine will not protect you. So that's where our washing our hands and social distancing and asking people to stay home if they're feeling sick until we're all vaccinated. Okay. We're going to do an interpreter switch. Maybe. Okay, nope.
Gabby, I'm going to keep going because the other interpreter's not here.
Got it. So now I'm going to start talking about specific vaccines for our different diseases or different viruses. So COVID-19. COVID-19 is recommended for everyone 6 months and older. And we have found, we've had COVID-19 for about 4 years now, that the vaccine protection does decrease over the time. So it is important to get an annual booster like we do with flu every year. I don't know if I have a point in this about in the slides, but you can get your COVID-19 vaccine and the flu at the same time. And that's what I did. I got one in each arm. And that is totally safe and okay. The only reason you might think about delaying a COVID-19 vaccine is if you've recently had COVID-19, you could delay for 3 months, unless you're immunocompromised or you're living with someone who also recently had COVID, or you may plan to be in a riskier situation, like visiting older relatives or visiting a new baby, then I would consider getting your vaccine, even though you just had COVID. Let's talk a little bit about vaccine science, which is what I'm excited about. So there are right now currently 2 technologies on the market for vaccines. There's the mRNA, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, which came out during the pandemic. And those are the mRNA vaccines. And we've talked about those before, but I just want to direct your attention to the picture of the COVID virus over on the screen. And you see those red spikes that are coming out? Those are the spike protein, and they are really distinct to COVID. Every single virus has a different signal it puts out, a different protein it puts out on the surface of itself. And COVID spike protein is easy for our cells to recognize and therefore easy to target with vaccines. So these red little spike proteins is what we are actually going to be vaccinating against. And so the mRNA vaccine gives our bodies a piece of that spike protein information, and we actually encode that spike protein ourselves. And our immune system says, what is that? It does not belong here. I'm going to attack it. And that's how we get our protective immunity. Again, that's how Pfizer and Moderna works. The second technological option is the Novavax vaccine, which is a protein subunit vaccine. And so that technology has been, we know about it, we've used it for a long time. We grow up just those little spike parts in the laboratory, and then we'll inject just a little part of that spike protein we'll inject into you with something that helps our bodies recognize this is not normal and it shouldn't be there. And that will elicit an immune response. So either way, we're training our bodies to recognize a little bit of the spike protein on COVID. Both technologies are safe and effective. Both technologies have had millions of people vaccinated with almost no incident. My dad. And yes, both technologies are safe and effective. Let's talk about influenza vaccine. The influenza vaccine is recommended for everybody 6 months and older. Again, it's an annual vaccine, a flu shot. I'm sure you've been hearing about this for years and years and years. This year, so this is an exciting part of vaccination science. This year, it's a trivalent vaccine, meaning 3, instead of a quadrivalent vaccine, meaning 4. So this year, if you get your flu shot, you'll be vaccinated against 2 flavors of flu A and only 1 flavor of flu B. And the thing that I'm really excited about is there used to be 2 flavors of flu B. And since COVID and people distanced and masked, that second flavor of flu B has no longer been seen. It has disappeared from the world, which is really exciting. So the recommendations and the influenza vaccines that are available only have 3 flavors of influenza available because that 4th is gone, which is exciting. I do want to make a note that people over 65 should get a higher dose of flu vaccine, which if you talk to your doctor or whoever vaccinates you, they will recommend this because it is potentially more effective and your immune system will recognize, hey, there's something wrong and mount a response against it. Okay, let's get to RSV. So RSV is also really exciting because the vaccines have only recently come out in the last few years. So the current recommendation is any adult that is 75 years or older and adults that are 60 to 74 years old that are at an increased risk for severe RSV. So like we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, immunocompromised people, pregnant people, people who have recently, actually the pregnant people, RSV, it really impacts infants, newborns, and the older population. So pregnant mothers have their own vaccine to pass immunity on to their babies before they're even born. But if you are 60 to 74 and have a higher risk for RSV and you have not been vaccinated, I would recommend that as well. This is the exciting part. Because these vaccines are so recent, we know that they provide protection for at least 2 years because that's how long we've had them. And we are continuing to see that it shows protection for at least 2 years. And it's not an annual vaccine at this time. We'll see as time goes on if it needs to be re-upped or refreshed, that vaccine. But it's exciting that we've had 2 years of data and we don't have to make it an annual vaccine. So that's my little spiel on vaccines. And I just want to reiterate that you can order 4 free COVID rapid tests. And a little note about just science and the laboratory in general that goes well with what we just talked about with RSV. The COVID-19 test box may say expired in June of 2024. And you're saying, I'm getting it in October of 2024. Why are they sending me expired tests? And it's because it is not expired yet. There is a lot of testing that goes on. And because this is such a new test, we're still figuring out how long these things are shelf stable for. So there's a lot more information, and the FDA publishes a list of expiration dates, and you can look it up on their website, but they are still good even though the box may say that it's expired. So if you have old COVID tests in your closet from the pandemic, they may still be good, and you can look that up online. Don't throw them out just yet. Okay. And my final little science fun thing, this is a fun fact I like to share. about washing your hands and bubbles, and this lets me get a little bit nerdy. I prefer to always wash my hands instead of using hand sanitizer. And I'll talk about why that is. So I wash my hands because of the bubbles. And the bubbles, actually, there's chemistry behind it, and you can see a picture on the bottom left of my cell and the middle as well. My cell is uses single carbon chains and a hydrophobic and a hydrophilic, a hydrophobic, hold on, hydrophobic tail, hydrophilic head, loves and hates. And what it does is it traps the oil and the dirt in the middle of this micelle, and it carries it away. So your dirt is actually, and your oil is actually trapped in the middle of this circle, and it shows up as bubbles. So that is what your bubbles are made out of, and why it's really important to have bubbles when you wash your hands. I also want to reiterate that you want to scrub your fingernails between your fingers, under your rings. There's a picture of someone with their hands who thought they did a good job hand washing on the right side of the screen. And there's an educational like lotion you can put on your hands, and it glows in the UV light. So you ask people to put this lotion on, they wash their hands, and then you put it under UV light, and you can see that this person did not pay attention to their fingernails, their knuckles, and a little bit between the fingers. I know that when I did it, my wrists, so I've been really washing my wrists really well since high school, because it was very obvious that I didn't wash my wrists very well. And that's just reducing the amount of germs that you bring around. And so with that, I would love to take any questions, and I have a list of links here. If you want to learn more about what I shared today, or if you want to keep up with FluView or the Department of Health, the Washington State Department of Health graphics throughout the season. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. Oh, sorry.
This is Karen House. Before we switch the interpreters right now, I would like to let Gabby know, there are no low vision people here, and John Pletcher, your team, is not here, could not make it. And so I don't think it's fair to keep you working solo, so you are excused, but please do charge us for the entire time, and thank you so much for your work. And Gabby says, oh, okay, what a nice surprise. Thank you. Thank you so very much. Okay, having said that, Dave and Elizabeth, if you'd like to, you can go ahead and switch now if you'd like. And Athena, are you ready to field some questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Okay, well, if anybody wants to ask a question, please refer to the bottom of your Zoom screen. We have a raise hand feature. Raise your hand. We will go ahead and look around for anybody and tell you to turn on your camera and ask your question. Oh my gosh.
And I'm going to stop sharing my, okay, good, yes.
Okay. Ready? Thank you.
All right, any questions? I'm trying to remember the question I had.
Well, that's easy.
Oh, yeah, okay, you had mentioned ILIs, and that is a new term for me. It's really good to know. And you're never sure which one you have, right? It's very confusing. And so I'm wondering, how do you know when you should test for COVID at home? How do you know?
That's a great question. Yeah, and I brought up the ILI thing. It is a bit of jargon, so you're not going to hear that in normal conversation, but I wanted to share that bit of science jargon. And if you go on the CDC website and start looking into the data, they might mention ILIs, and I wanted you to know about it. You're right. It's hard to tell if there's a difference between all of these different diseases. And the question of when do you test for COVID is when you think you're sick. You might not know the difference between flu or COVID, but that's what the test is for. And because, so one of the reasons we have the at-home tests is because COVID is so prevalent, you can test for it at home. So if you test for it and you still feel sick, you might have the flu. You might have something else that you can't test for at home. So I would still recommend trusting yourself to know when you should be masking, when you should stay home, but it tells you if you have COVID.
This is Karen. Another question. Well, one more question. It looks like Karen Atwood has her hand raised as well. But previously, I think it was in the summer, the name for the COVID variant, I'm not sure if that's the right word, was flirt, but what's the name of the new COVID variant?
So
what's the name of that?
Is
that the right word?
Yeah, flirt. We've gotten down the rabbit hole of, we don't have as many nice Greek acronym or nice Greek letters like Omicron and Delta. We are now deep in the Omicron rabbit hole of flirt, and JN, I think JN1 or JN3, but it's JN something is the current. There's a lot of JN around. But it's all based on the Omicron variant.
Oh, okay. And it looks like Karen Atwood has her hand raised, so I'll cede the floor to her. Great. Let me take that away. Okay, this is Karen. Hello. So good to see you. Hugs. Good to see you as well. I was reading the newspaper this morning and they mentioned avian flu. And so I know there's the flu, but is that associated with birds and chickens? I mean, there's the regular flu. So I just wanted to ask you, what's the difference?
Absolutely. That's a great question. A couple of the flavors that I talked about with flu A, one of those is actually related to avian flu. Or, no, it's not. We don't get vaccinated again because we don't get vaccinated against avian flu, excuse me. Avian flu is H5N1, and the ones we're vaccinated against are H3N1 and H1N1. The H's and the N's, here's another science thing. Remember COVID, the red things on the outside, the spike proteins, and how every single virus has different surface indicators? It's the H and the N, they're just different names. So it's neuraminidase. You're doing great. Oh, neuraminidase and hemagglutinin they're just different surface indicators. And that's what the H and the N are for. I digress, sorry. The avian flu we are not vaccinated against it, and it's very pathogenic, but it has not really been a concern this season because it's not in humans yet. Not in humans.
Okay,
The
this is Karen.
USDA is
Okay,
watching this
so
alert.
it's in the birds then. It's in the birds or
Correct.
the chickens.
That's correct.
Okay.
It's in wild birds, it's in chickens. The USDA is very, very, very interested in watching. And I can guarantee your local Washington state goes out and swabs birds, physically swabs chickens. There's a scientist just like me that goes out and swabs hundreds of chickens, takes it back to the lab and tests for it. So I guarantee you that's happening across the country, as well as in Washington state. So we are very aware of it. But it has not been a problem this season yet. But it is something, that's why it's concerning, is because it's common and we don't normally vaccinate for it because it's not that common. It normally just stays in the chickens and wild bird populations.
This is Karen Atwood. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Karen House. So COVID-19 then is here to stay moving forward, even though it has decreased in severity. Is that correct? It's here to stay moving forward. And I'm wondering, how many COVID variants have we had so far? Do you know how many?
Okay, there's not a number for how many. Yes, I believe COVID is here to stay. I think that getting a COVID vaccine and a flu vaccine is going to be something that we're going to be doing for a long time every year. I remember when I was on, I don't know, probably 2 years ago, I was saying, oh, maybe it won't be an annual thing. Maybe it will. We don't know yet. We have enough data to say we are probably going to be getting COVID vaccines every single year. In terms of the number of variants, a lot. Hundreds, thousands, no, thousands, definitely thousands, maybe tens of thousands. Because a variant just means that it's slightly different from anything else that has come before it. It doesn't mean that it's more virulent. It doesn't mean it can infect people better. It doesn't mean you'll get more sick from it. It's just the differences in the genetic code from each other. So there are a lot of duds that are out there, but the majority of people tend to have a handful of variants across the country.
This is Karen Atwood. Go ahead, Karen. Yeah, I would really like for you to send Karen and myself your PowerPoint so that we can share that with the community. And I do have a question. Can we contact you, please, for that?
Yeah.
And then also, before we wrap up, I do want to introduce your mom. Is that okay? Can I do that? I would love to see her and for everyone to get to know who she is, your mom, Athena's mom. Is that okay?
Yeah, of
All right.
course. If mom will turn her camera on. Well, yes, Karen House has this PowerPoint in her email.
Yeah, your mom's not turning her camera on. She hasn't turned it on yet. Maybe she's feeling shy.
I doubt it.
Karen Atwood. We're going to ask your mom to turn on her video, but yep, go ahead. This is Karen House. Are there people who still don't believe in COVID, or has that number reduced?
No, it's still very, side note about my mom, there's a baby crying in the background, so I'm sure she's dealing with that right now. Yeah, absolutely. There are people that still don't believe in vaccines. There are people that don't believe in COVID. There are people that don't believe in HIV and AIDS. So this is something we've seen for a while. This is something we knew was going to happen. Vaccine denialism, science denialism. Yeah. But I hope that by being a real person and a real scientist, and I do not make a lot of money. I am not a government shill, or hired by the drug companies or whatever. I'm just a person that does
Right,
research
good point.
and like science. And I'm happy to answer any questions. There she is.
This is Karen. I'm going to add a spotlight to your mom now. Hi, hello everyone. All right, that's your mom. This is Christine. Yes, I'm Athena's mom. This is your sign name, Christine. Karen Atwood is giving a big applause, as is Athena, as is Christine. Thank you so much, Athena. Thank you so much for this, for giving this talk. So thank you. And this is Karen Philo House. How did you influence her to become a scientist? How did this happen? This is Christine. Well, when Athena was a baby, I was in a PhD program and I was studying how to do research and just how to conduct research and the importance of collecting data for research. And then I taught my 3 girls the importance of collecting data and evidence and the need for that. And so Athena is a scientist. And then my other, and I missed the sign name, she is
A data analyst.
Narissa is a data analyst. And she works for the state of Washington for the government. And then my third child,
Diana.
Diana, thank you. She is a mother with 2 babies, so she's currently not working. This is Karen Philo House. Wow, you've had such a huge influence. And Christine is saying, I showed them the importance of data and number collection. So Karen is saying, yeah, exactly. Especially now, we don't have enough interpreters, and we just started a work group actually to collect data on that, to prove the need and to provide recommendations on what to do moving forward with that issue, that we don't have enough interpreters, ASL interpreters specifically is what I'm referring to, but data is very important. Christine is saying, yes, it is truly important. And also collecting funds as well for establishing an interpreter training program as well. We need to look for funding for it. Karen is saying exactly. And I'm sure you are teaching ASL students. I'm sure some of them want to become interpreters, but where do they even go? Exactly. There are a lot of students who do want to become interpreters, but there isn't a local interpreting program for them to attend. So Karen is saying exactly, Washington State doesn't have a program currently. Well, there is one in Spokane, but that is more specifically for educational interpreters. Exactly, that's for educational interpreters, not for freelance interpreters. Wow. Okay, so we're going to switch interpreters again.
And Karen is saying, okay, well, any last minute questions then before we wrap things up? If you're shy, you can always ask your question via the chat. I certainly understand the shyness portion.
I have more information that I'm excited to share. So not a question, but what I do in my daily job is sequencing for bacteria that make people sick. And so recently you might have heard that McDonald's, if you've heard about the E. coli in McDonald's yesterday, there is E. coli in some McDonald's Big Macs. Yeah. McDonald's hamburgers. Yeah.
Aaron is saying in Montana or McDonald's? What do you mean?
And yeah, the hamburgers at McDonald's are, they found cases. There are about 50 cases of people that have gotten sick with E. coli 0157 from, they think, McDonald's Big Macs. And they think it's, yes, as of
Recently?
yesterday. It was released yesterday.
Yes.
So it's either in the patties or in the slivered onions that are on the burger. I obviously do not know because I am not part of that investigation, but we suspect it's
or the lettuce. I thought it was the lettuce your mom is saying.
We know Karen Atwood put in the chat thought it was onions. We probably think it's onions. It hasn't been confirmed yet, but the onions aren't cooked. But they have not narrowed it down between the burger patties or the onions. But I did want to say that it is not in Washington. The McDonald's, there have been no cases in Washington. And you guys are okay. Tennessee is okay. We can keep having our Big Macs for now. But just the importance of public health and things that we're tracking all the time. This also relates. Yes, Cynthia's right. One person died in the chat. She put one person died, and I think 50 people were sick. So we'll see. We are tracking it as time goes on. So what happens in that scenario, this is what I do at my daily job, is someone goes to the hospital and they are sick. They have diarrhea. They have vomiting. The doctor runs tests, collects stool samples, so poop, and that is isolated to be, the lab finds out it's E. coli 0157. They send it to a state lab, which then sequences it, which is what I do. And then we connect it to the national database to say, hey, has anyone else seen this exact strain, this exact bacteria? And that's how we're able to make big connections in cases like this. So to respond to Cynthia in the chat, most of the cases have been in Colorado and Kansas. Yes, most of the cases have been in Colorado and Kansas. There are a couple other places, but that's where the majority of cases are right now. And you can find more about it on the CDC's website.
That is crazy, Karen House is saying. Wow. Wow. And this is Christine. Oh, you wanted to say something, Christine? Yeah, hey, Athena, the avian flu, is that something we should be concerned about because of the chickens? I mean, is that something that we could get sick from? I mean, because we do deal with them and slaughter them and eat them. I mean, maybe it has some type of effect on the meat that we eat, you know, the chicken meat, or maybe through the machinery or some other type of...
Avian flu. So avian flu, again, it's not really a concern this year. But last year, avian flu was a big concern. And if you remember, the price of eggs went up a lot last year. Like a dozen of eggs was like up to $6 in some places. It's because when a herd, or when a flock, sorry, birds, when a flock is positive for chicken or avian influenza, that flock is culled, the entire flock, because it's not worth the risk. So then Christine is right. It does increase the prices of chicken meat, of eggs productions. Occasionally our vaccine, actually it doesn't affect our vaccine production because the US government has a secret supply of chickens to produce chicken eggs for the flu vaccine every year. Another fun fact. But yes, once avian influenza becomes an issue, as it has in previous years, the price of eggs and poultry does go up. The avian influenza has been in the news this year. Avian influenza has been, thank you so much, Cynthia, for closing, or for being here. But avian influenza was in the news this year because it was found in cattle, it was found in cows, which is not common, and was really surprising because we haven't seen it there before. But it's kind of stayed there. We're watching it, but it's nothing to be really concerned about yet.
And Karen House is saying, yeah, I was planning to ask about the cows because a long time ago, probably before you were born, there was something called mad cow disease. And I was traveling throughout Great Britain at the time. And it was very interesting because at a later time, I decided I wanted to donate some blood. And they told me, no, I could not do so because I was there in England at the time of mad cow disease. And then fast forward, last year, there was a big announcement that there are no more barriers to giving blood. And so I could give blood again. So I found that very interesting. Now with mad cow disease, I think it was just one time, right? Because I'd never really heard of that happening again.
So mad cow disease is really interesting. It is actually not a virus. It is not a bacteria. It is actually a protein in the brain that misfolds. Like proteins fold up and they become proteins. But mad cow disease, and there are a couple other diseases like it called prion disease, Prion. Those are the misfolded brain proteins. And it's really scary because it's almost impossible to get rid of. You can't bleach it. You can't autoclave it. You can't, it's really scary. It's very difficult to get rid of, which is why there's such tight biocontrols around prion disease.
Wow. Because that reminds me, there was a friend of mine, her mother, no, sorry, her father died from mad cow disease. And I mean, how do you get that now?
So I'm not as familiar with the like the mechanism of how it works, but you would eat that protein and that protein would make it through your bloodstream into the blood-brain barrier into your brain and start to misfold the proteins in your brain. And it's really a problem because we were eating cows. There's a different version of the disease. Basically, unless you're eating people's brains, it's not really going to be a problem. Unless we have zombies. Happy Halloween.
Wow. Oh, wait, there was one person that had to go. You know that, they said that in the chat. It seems like there was no other questions, darn. But I am so thrilled that you joined us tonight. And it's so nice to learn about ILI. It's new to me. And it's nice to hear about the RSV and about the vaccine. What was it you said? Over 74, age 74, and all of that. It's so good to know. So now I don't have to worry about getting the RSV shot, because I was kind of on the fence about should I or shouldn't I? So it's good to know that I don't need it. So,
as always,
well,
talk to your doctor.
Yes, that is very true. Very true. Okay. Thank you, Athena saying. And Christine says, all right, bye, honey, love you. And Athena's saying, bye-bye. And Karen is saying, okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. It was so good to see you, Athena. Karen out was saying, it's so good to see you, Christine. Love all of you. Bye-bye. And thank you to the interpreters, Athena saying, thank you so much. Gabby is saying, thank you so much for that information. It was very, very interesting information. It's so good to know. Thank you. And everybody's just waving goodbye now. So everybody is signing off. Thank you.
Thank you again.